sounds of the farms, the low of the cattle and the barking of the sheepdogs, a faint, thin noise from far away. It was growing late, and as the shadows blackened, he walked faster, till once more the lane began to descend. There was a sharp turn, and he found himself, with a good deal of relief and a little disappointment, on familiar ground. He had nearly described a circle, and knew this end of the lane very well. It was not much more than a mile from home. He walked smartly down the hill. The air was all glimmering and indistinct, transmuting trees and hedges into ghostly shapes, and the walls of the White House farm flickered on the hillside, as if they were moving towards him. Then a change came. First, a little breath of wind brushed with a dry whispering sound through the hedges. The few leaves left on the boughs began to stir, and one or two danced madly, and as the wind freshened and came up from a new quarter, the sapless branches above rattled against one another like bones. The growing breeze seemed to clear the air and lighten it. He was passing the stile where a path led to old Mrs. Gibbon's desolate little cottage, in the middle of the fields, at some distance even from the lane, and he saw the light blue smoke of her chimney rise distinct above the gaunt greengage trees, against a pale band that was broadening along the horizon. As he passed the stile with his head bent and his eyes on the ground, something white started out from the black shadow of the hedge, and in the strange twilight, now tinged with a flush from the west, a figure seemed to swim past him and disappear. For a moment he wondered who it could be. The light was so flickering and unsteady, so unlike the real atmosphere of the day. When he recollected, it was only Annie Morgan, old Morgan's daughter at the White House. She was 3 years older than he, and it annoyed him to find that, though she was only 15, there had been a dreadful increase in her height since the summer holidays. He had got to the bottom of the hill, and lifting up his eyes, saw the strange changes of the sky. The pale band had broadened into a clear, vast space of light, and above, the heavy leaden clouds were breaking apart and driving across the heaven before the wind. He stopped to watch, and looked up at the great mound that jutted out from the hills into mid-valley. It was a natural formation, and always it must have had something of the form of a fort, but its steepness had been increased by Roman art, and there were high banks on the summit which Lucian's father had told him were the vallum of the camp, and a deep ditch had been dug to the north to sever it from the hillside. On this summit oaks had grown, queer, stunted-looking trees with twisted and contorted trunks and writhing branches, and these now stood out black against the lighted sky. And then the air changed once more. The flush increased, and a spot like blood appeared in the pond by the gate, and all the clouds were touched with fiery spots and dapples of flame. Here and there it looked as if awful furnace doors were being opened. The wind blew wildly, and it came up through the woods with a noise like a scream, and a great oak by the roadside ground its boughs together with a dismal grating jar. As the red gained in the sky, the earth and all upon it glowed. Even the gray winter fields and the bare hillsides crimsoned, the water pools were cisterns of molten brass, and the very road glittered. He was wonderstruck, almost aghast, before the scarlet magic of the afterglow. The old Roman fort was invested with fire. Flames from heaven were smitten about its walls, and above there was a dark floating cloud, like fume of smoke, and every haggard, writhing tree showed as black as midnight against the black of the furnace. When he got home, he heard his mother's voice calling, "Here's Lucian at last. Mary, Master Lucian has come. You can get the tea ready." He told a long tale of his adventures, and felt somewhat mortified when his father seemed perfectly acquainted with the whole course of the lane, and knew the names of the wild woods through which he had passed in awe. "You must have gone by the Darren, I suppose." That was all he said. "Yes, I noticed the sunset. We shall have some stormy weather. I don't expect to see many in church tomorrow." There was buttered toast for tea because it was the holidays. The red curtains were drawn, and a bright fire was burning, and there was old familiar furniture, a little